Let's say good morning to Dr. Jillian Roberts, who is a child psychologist and associate professor of educational psychology at UVic, the author of several books which have looked at resilient children and trauma and tragedy. And Dr. Roberts is in Victoria, BC this morning, meaning it's 4 in the morning, 4:40, and we think that you are an absolute champ, Dr. Roberts, for joining us now and through the rest of our program. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So why don't we just jump right into some viewer questions, because we're already getting some very good ones for you, Dr. Roberts. And similar to what you're getting in your own appointments, Laurel writes that she has 2 children, 12 and 8, and they are displaying a range of emotions daily: anger, sadness, fatigue. She's concerned the pandemic is having an impact on their mental health and is wondering what she can do, and obviously other parents can derive some help from this advice. But what can we do to support them beyond daily exercise and a consistent routine?
Right. Well, those symptoms are sounding to me like the beginning of a childhood depression. So I would be watching those symptoms particularly carefully. When a child is beginning to slip into a depression, one of the things that we know is that they've got a great deal of negative self-talk happening in their own head that is precipitating those symptoms. So I would be making sure that you were talking to children in a way that was reframing what they were thinking. You know, this isn't the end of the world. This isn't the apocalypse. Our life is on pause, and every day to create something that the child can look forward to. I've got a break between this meeting and that meeting. How about we go in the back garden and have a picnic? Or how about we snuggle and read your favorite book? But you need to ensure that the child has something that they can fill their mind with that is positive. If a child is in a very negative place and they've got a worry that they can't get rid of, we know that activating the body, so jumping on a trampoline or quieting the body, like soaking in a bathtub, those are 2 ways that you can help the mind switch onto something else. One thing I like to do, I have a 7-year-old at home, and one of the things that I like to do is turn on music and dance around the kitchen, and that seems to change the energy pretty quickly.
So that is very helpful. What this mom wrote, Laurel wrote, in terms of what they've already constructed in their home, it sounds like they're focusing on daily exercise to get that body moving, as you suggest, and a consistent routine. Are those good places to start as well? Are those important things that parents should try to create?
Absolutely. I would add probably 2 things to that mix, if I could. One is try to have a regular Skype or Zoom or some kind of social connection with one of the child's friends. So I've been doing this with a wonderful mother who's been helping me out when I, for example, have to jump on a video call with a patient. I can set up a Skype with my little boy and her little boy, and that's something that both little boys look forward to. So I would be trying to do some of that, some kind of social connection for the child. And then I would also try to do something that was creative. So whether it be that you bring some art supplies out or music, something that engaged that other side of the brain to balance out the day.
We're getting some questions as well from parents or grandparents of children with special needs, and Deborah's is one I think I'd like to address this hour with you. An older couple raising their 8-year-old grandson who has a mild intellectual disability, Deborah writes, Dr. Roberts. Lately, he will not go outside even to play in the yard, and when we try to get him to do that, he starts vomiting. So how do we help him with this anxiety?
Right. Well, that is anxiety, so that's the right call. That tells me that that child is slipping in to a place of tremendous fearfulness. Typically, when we're working with a child with anxiety, we lean into that anxiety a little bit. We don't let the anxiety win. So maybe not make the child go outside, but see if they can stick their foot out the door, put their hand out the door, and then I would back off at that point. So you don't want to be pushing so far that the child is vomiting, but you want to just try to edge as close as you can, and then every day, if you can, push a little tiny bit further, so your foot and then your ankle, then your leg, and then both feet, to when the child is desensitized and the fear comes down. If that child is that fearful, my suspicion is that they're listening to the news or the radio, or they're overhearing adult conversations that is fueling that anxiety. So I would be really careful to make sure that you're not listening to any of that. Listen to the news with earbuds on. Have conversations when the child is sleeping. Don't allow your own anxiety or the adult worries to be infiltrating that child's life.
I have a great question from Valerie, and it actually gets to two points. So let me jump in. It's a long one. She's a grandmother of a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old, and she's trying to keep them focused on the daily routine, Dr. Roberts. Not a teacher, but working with the education, and she's concerned that she's failing them, and that's making her uneasy and stressed, which is part A of the story, but she doesn't want to pass her concern on to them inadvertently. Here's what they do at home. Crafts, they write stories, they do science experiments, they do math, they play outside, they read. She tries to create a balanced day, but they are rapidly growing bored. So she wonders, how can she change it up and keep them learning without putting too much pressure on them and causing them stress?
Well, I think she's doing an excellent job. You know, we need to remember that this is not an education tragedy. This is a virus pandemic. Making sure that our children are safe and healthy is the #1 goal right now. So I'm not tremendously worried if there's not super huge educational gains right now. I think it's okay just to maintain where children are at, reviewing work that they've already done. But in order to keep it interesting, I would be using technology a little bit. You know, can they make an interesting commercial? Can they play around with video and editing video? Can they do a special project, an inquiry-based project on a topic of interest, and then maybe present that online to distant relatives? So I would use technology and an inquiry-based kind of focus, but I wouldn't worry too much. I think she's doing an amazing job.
We got a question from Ron, and I promised you this one last time we spoke, saying unfortunately he and his wife are going through a divorce, and they have a teenage daughter who is 17. Ron writes she's a bit stressed in general because all of her sports and extracurricular activities are shut down because of the virus, and then there's the divorce on top of it all. She's very stressed and worried, and he's wondering if you could share some tips to help her mind stay clear and happy.
Well, I would say it's important to help her look forward. You know, if she is 17, that means that there's likely going to be a transition coming up in her life in terms of after high school and what she's going to do. So I would be focusing on that, keeping her, you know, her eye on the ball, and not being too distracted by what's going on right now. The other thing I would say is, as much as it is possible for you and your former partner to keep things friendly and amicable, now is not the time to sort of rehash the past and bring up things that were the reason for the divorce. I would be speaking very positively about each other in front of your daughter, because having to go through this and a divorce at the same time and have all of that negativity layer up on top of each other could be really destructive for your daughter. So now is the time to have as positive a separation as is possible.
I'm wondering, another very, very horrific scenario, obviously, and a fear that some children have. The 3-year-old, just before going to sleep, burst into tears and was talking about, you know, her mother's death. Well, we had a similar question from Jennifer, her daughter, saying, "I don't want you to die, Mommy." How do we address specifically on the child's fears of death, Dr. Roberts?
Well, I would be very clear with your child that this is something that mostly affects older people and people who are already sick. It is not something that is dangerous for younger people. And so the reason why we are all staying isolated is to keep each other safe. It's not because we're at tremendous risk. We're doing this as part of a social contract to keep our elders safe and to make sure that the vulnerable in our society are not put at risk, but we're not at risk. So just to reassure children and take that fear just completely off of their plate, you know, I would go ahead and promise that you're going to be just fine, and that's not something that they need to worry about.
Brenda in St. Catharines writes about how can she help a little boy who seems to cry easily. Seems like he's trying to hold it back, But a little thing and his eyes get red and full of tears, she writes. He's almost 8, an exceptionally bright little boy, so may have more than a passing understanding about things that are going on around him. But that's a concerned grandma in St. Catharines, Dr. Roberts.
I would pick that little one up and give him a big hug, pull him on your lap, and tell him everything is going to be just fine. I would empathize with him, explain that you understand how he's feeling and that it's okay to feel that way. But I'd be careful not to feed into it too much. Don't spend a lot of time making that worry bigger. You want to reassure that child, hug them, give them permission to have their feeling, and then as soon as you can, redirect them, probably to something with a little boy, something a little bit more active. So go for a walk, go shoot some basketballs, maybe do some baking together. So honor the emotion and distract and do something else.
We are hearing from a dad this time as far as beginning our conversation, Dr. Roberts, about how he and his wife are working full days at home and doing their best to balance the needs of their 3-year-old son and 5-year-old daughter. So dad works early in the morning and mom works until late at night. This is probably so typical of many homes. He writes, this balancing act has caused tremendous pressure and resentment, and it comes out as conflict in front of the kids. I also fear that they feel like work is more important than family. I'm worried about the effect on our kids. Our son gets angry and yells when my wife and I argue. The kid on their own, they have fights and their outbursts are escalating. What can dad do to get this situation going in a healthier direction?
Well, I would say it's important to get outside. It sounds a little bit like you're inside a little bit too much. I would get outside. The other thing, and I would be careful with this, but I would use technology a little bit more. So I'm big on maintaining a strict control on screen time. But just like when you're on a long flight or a long car ride, and you let your children have a little bit more access to screen time, I would be sprinkling a little bit more screen time throughout the day to give your family a chance to have together time. So for you and your wife to connect and have let's say coffee in the morning, in the middle of the day, and at the evening, and have your children be watching something perhaps on Treehouse, and giving you those moments. So just ease up a tiny bit, not too much on screen time, but enough to allow you a little bit more connection time with your spouse through the day.
This is a question from Lily, Dr. Roberts, that begins, I am desperate. Lily has a 2.5-year-old son who's with his father right now and who has been doing a great job, she says, dealing with the lack of daycare. Mom, Lily, is in self-isolation and can only communicate through FaceTime. So so she's away from him. How does she let a 2.5-year-old know what is happening, why he can't come over to his mom's right now, and to keep him from feeling like mom abandoned him? What more can she be doing?
Well, I would be bookending that child's day. So I would be FaceTiming with him in the morning and FaceTiming with him at night, for sure, if not a little bit through the day. And the other person taking care of that child, it's their responsibility right now to distract the child to the best of their ability. A 2.5-year-old should be easily distractible. So make it fun, do lots of sensory play for that age. So extended bubble bath time, finger paints, playing with dough, but distract that child as much as you can so that they're not overly dwelling on being away from mom. Similar to how a preschool teacher or a kindergarten teacher would do at those moments of separation is, you just divert the child the best you can.
And a final question, it's from Mo, but it echoes one that we got earlier, Dr. Roberts, from Noha. So I'll put Mo's words, but it's also Noha's sentiments. Mo has a daughter who's 8, and every couple of days, he writes, she gets extremely upset at the situation. She misses her friends, she wants to go outside and play, she hates being inside. She understands why it's necessary to self-isolate, but she doesn't like it. What can Mo do to encourage her spirits? We want her to express her emotions, but not linger on them. Obviously a thankful dad, or a thoughtful dad in terms of what the proper response. So what would you say to Mo and Noha?
I would try to get outside. I don't think that going outside is dangerous as long as you have that appropriate distance from other people. So if there's an empty space outside where you can be for a little bit, I would do that. And I would also be creating FaceTime play dates with friends. I have a 7-year-old, and I've been doing that every day, and that has been very, very helpful. So he's looking forward to those moments when he can connect with a friend. So use technology to your advantage right now, and try to create things that the child is looking forward to.
You, Dr. Roberts, have been very, very helpful, if I can use your own words right there. I want to thank you at home watching for those excellent questions, and hopefully we've helped you navigate some of the difficult conversations with your children. But Dr. Roberts, just fantastic information this morning, and thank you particularly for getting up so early with us to be live out of Victoria this morning. We appreciate it.